Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 22nd of November 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish, with me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And I'm delighted to say that we'll be joined today by David Ellis from Strategic Defence Initiatives and also by Alex Thomson with Eastern Approaches. And Alex, of course, speaking to us live from the Netherlands. Well, we're not going to mention the weather except to say that many people have still got a lot of rain at the moment and flood risk is still high. If anybody has got flooding trouble, our thoughts are with you. But at the moment, we think analysis of political events is the important topic. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, we're going to start with European issues. And Alex, Italy's referendum holds the key to the future of the euro. So the Financial Times here saying that on the 5th of December, Europe could wake up to an immediate threat of disintegration. And you wanted to quote this section. It says, a French or Italian exit from the euro would bring about the biggest default in history. Foreign holders of Italian or French euro-dominated debt would be paid in the equivalents of lira or French francs. Both would devalue, since banks do not have to hold capital against their holdings of government bonds. The losses would force many continental banks into immediate bankruptcy. Germany would then realize a massive current account surplus, which also has its downsides. There's a lot of German wealth waiting to be defaulted on. Can this be prevented? In theory, it can, but it would require a series of decisions taken in time and in the right sequence. For starters, Mrs. Merkel would have to accept what she refused in 2012, a roadmap towards full fiscal and political union. The EU would also need to strengthen the European Stability Mechanism, the rescue umbrella, which is not designed to handle countries the size of Italy or France. So that all sounds pretty serious.
Yes, Mike, it is pretty serious, and it's above all interesting that the Financial Times has caught on to this, because this is the kind of stuff that Zero Hedge, one of the new blacklisted websites of fake news, if you believe some people, but Zero Hedge has been saying this for a couple of years, and now the FT, which is very much establishment city organ, is saying the same thing. I know there's always people who kind of switch off mentally, including some of our viewers, when they hear default bonds, but it's pretty simple. France and Italy have got a lot of debt, and if they leave the euro, they're going to have to pay that back in their relaunched national currencies, which is going to seesaw the euro quite spectacularly. At the moment, there's been a deliberate mechanism of pretending that all the economies in the Eurozone are compatible, the northern Germanic ones and the southern Mediterranean ones. And if you then have got a fake parity, which has been basically affected by pretending that you have a single economy like the United States, if the weaker economies, although Italy and France have got a lot of wealth in them actually, if they go down, German holdings are going to go very much up. It's going to be unpayable on a forward. So Germany is in a real cleft stick here, and you can see why Merkel is berating not just the weakest countries anymore like Greece, but even France and Italy, and why Merkel is having more of an important role in dealing with us on Brexit than the European central institutions are, because it's Germany's wealth holders who stand to lose a huge amount, both the industrialists and those holding debt. And it suddenly becomes clear why Obama and Merkel have had these emergency talks before Obama shuffles off the stage, according to which Merkel has decided to stand for an unprecedented fourth term as federal chancellor, although she's old and knackered and has been at the helm for 12 years and would have liked to have gone off into retirement. She just can't. She is absolutely required to carry on at that role, because she is the last woman standing of that large club of globalists. If we get more continental countries next year, we've got several elections next year, if more of them throw off the globalists who are currently governing the country, then you're really only going to have Merkel left. You're going to see things get very nasty, both within Germany, crushing the opposition, the new alternative media opposition, and also crushing alternative and sovereign governments in the rest of Europe.
David, have you any thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. It's very clear. The cure for this problem will be the attempts that we're now seeing yesterday to get the EU military union, and that will be enough to lock in the countries in a more than a multiple sort of physical sense, because it's industrially, it's militarily. There'll be a quantity of money enough in that pot in the Eurozone to secure the default by sort of both ends of the spectrum. It will just be the money that the EU will announce in spending, but then of course it'll be the fact that everybody's locked into the arrangement and can't get out. So that'll mitigate the default sort of scenario. So this is why they're going hell for leather now to try and get the military union done and dusted. And this is why there's such a sort of mad panic, and why there's this massive pretext being generated for Russia being such a horrendous and nasty affair, and using the lever of Syria to sort of do it. So everyone's being duped here. It's a very, very serious situation because there's an awful lot at stake.
Absolutely.
Just very interested in the language that particularly Alex has used there, because we're talking about dangerous times, crushing of alternative media. So we've got really amazing things unfolding. We've got France that is still effectively under martial law. We've got the British government saying we need secret arrests, and we're going to clamp down on investigative journalism. We also are seeing between the UK and the US the desire to clamp down on alternative media sites globally. We're allocating billions of pounds to the GCHQ and intelligence service budget in order to counter so-called cybercrime. And we've got Germany now becoming ever more powerful in Europe. And as we're going to discuss in a minute, we've got big things happening with defence. This is very sinister. Could we say it's as dangerous as the period before the start of the Second World War?
Quite possibly. Now, Alex, you wanted to also cover this one, unconstitutional Bavarian referenda.
Yes, this is from Bayerischer Rundfunk, the Bavarian broadcaster. And it's a very interesting situation. Bavaria is a sovereign state that voluntarily joined Germany. Bavarians still have citizenship of Bavaria, according to their constitution, as well as German citizenship. And the parties are even different. The Christian Democrats, the CDU, don't exist in Bavaria. What they have instead is a sister party, the CSU. So it's it's as if the Conservative and Unionist Party of Scotland was a separate party, just allied to the Conservatives south of the border. Now, these Bavarian Conservatives, who are allied to Merkel's governing Christian Conservatives, have tried to do one of these populist non-referenda that we have seen in Britain with Brexit. In other words, non-binding referenda. They introduced them to Bavaria, which is the largest state in Germany, last year. And immediately, some of the leftist parties, you can see the close parallels to Brexit here. I should remember to speak up, by the way, because apparently I'm quite quiet. I don't think you can turn me up at your end, so I'll shout louder. So the left parties in Bavaria said, hang on, these referenda are non-binding. They're not plebiscites. The people are not deciding. It's simply a SOP, and that is not constitutional because you're consulting people under false premises. And you're really thwarting their mandate. They've given us a mandate in Parliament, and you have not explicitly taken that mandate back. So these referenda mean nothing. And the Constitutional Court has now upheld that complaint by the leftist parties. And not for the first time, we see that the socialist and almost soft Marxist parties have got a better understanding, a less perverted understanding of the Constitution than the so-called conservatives and moderate right-wing parties of the radical centre who are trying to push things through. So we've now seen a very, very serious Constitutional Court, the most respected institution in Germany, saying, no, if you're going to have a referenda, they must be binding. So we see the same mess that we've had in Britain through the unconstitutional means of the Brexit referendum.
Alex, I mean, what's your take? There seems to be a lot of pressure building in Europe as a whole to have referenda of a type that, similar to Brexit. Where's this agenda coming from? Where's this drive coming from?
You know, Mike, it's like the regionalisation drive, which has affected all the countries which were not already federal. All the major Western European countries, except Germany and Spain, had central governments. And all of a sudden, Britain, Italy, France, and the Netherlands, within the same 12-month period, said, let's merge the existing counties and districts into super regions, and let's devolve a lot of powers from the central government. So obviously that plan was coming from someone else. If you put the information together with what we learned last Saturday, or some of us already knew, before the Winchester Conference about the bankers, I think the bankers dictated that. And I think the bankers are also now directing our politicians to call consultative, which means meaningless, referenda, SOP referenda. in all of these countries to give the people a sense that they've had their say, they've got it off their chest, and they can go back to sleep. So I think it's a banking policy.
And specifically Bank for International Settlements.
Well, yes, because as we saw on Saturday, that is the Death Star at the top of the financial pyramid. These are the bankers who have openly written about controlling governments and denying us our security of property so that we'll do as we're told.
Okay, well, look, let's move on to Brexit. And at the weekend, of course, one of the items which was discussed was the claim of right, because we were discussing the Constitution and constitutional documents. And this article from The Guardian here headlined Scottish claim of right to be used in the Brexit case against the UK government. So in what context could that particular document be used?
In the only context in which it could be used is a kind of judicial revisionism. Now that we have a Supreme Court, we're having the same problem that the US Supreme Court has, which is judicial activism or legislating from the bench. What happens is QCs submit arguments that the spirit of our constitutional documents has set a precedent for things which are not in that document. In the US, revisionist judges call the Constitution a living document, so that each generation of judges has to interpret it through jurisprudence. That's how you get, for example, entitlements to homosexual marriage or entitlements to benefits, which were never in our constitutions. Likewise, the claim of right, and by the way, no journalists are getting this right, it is the capital C claim of capital R right, singular. Everyone is spelling it lowercase or with an S on the end, like Bill of Rights in England, which it isn't. Shows how little they know about it. But the claim of right is Scotland's constitutional settlement, the treaty with the monarch, with William III, which was the equivalent of England and Wales's Bill of Rights. And it mentions Parliament many times, that claim of right, but it doesn't say anything about this argument that Parliament has to decide on constitutional matters. No, it says that the sovereign is bound to consult the people. And the stupid revisionist argument in here is this claim of right says that the people have to be consulted. Now, of course, we know that means Parliament, so please issue a ruling, judges, that Parliament has to have a vote on this, thwarting the will of the people. You see, just as we were discussing on Saturday, how if you don't look at the text of constitutional documents and just argue about their so-called spirit, then you can make anything mean anything, including that Parliament means people.
Well, yes, and that it's divine, Alex, as well.
Oh, there's definitely a kind of secular religion coming in. We didn't even hear the word constitutional in Britain up to 10 years ago. It's healthy that people are now aware south of the border that Scots law is distinct but complementary to English law, which we didn't know before the devolution settlement got this far. But everyone, every man-jack of politicians now is claiming if they don't like something, they either say it's unconstitutional or unlawful, whereas at most what they mean is illegal under statute or against precedent. So don't be put off by the words people use. Actually inquire into what sources they're using and what they mean by words. Everything in law is about the meaning of words, as we heard on Saturday at Winchester.
Yeah. Of course, we've been saying since the Brexit referendum was announced that every man and his dog would be getting involved in trying to sidetrack it or subvert it and whatnot. And now the European Union wants to do that. The European Court of Justice, they are they're going to be ruling on whether it's possible that if the British government invokes Article 50, that it could revoke that invocation. You see what I mean? So basically, what the British government is suggesting is that, well, we're not going to start any negotiations until Article 50 is invoked. We therefore don't know what the outcome is going to be, so all cards are on the table when it comes to the end result. People in Britain may not like the end result, so at that point they'll get the opportunity to revoke Article 50 and stay within the EU if they want to. Well, the European Court of Justice saying that they're going to rule on whether that's even possible. The implications are that they're attempting to ramp up the fear in this country once again, that if we get ourselves into a situation which is unpalatable to us, we won't be able to get out of it again. So better not to try, Brian.
This is all obfuscation, Mike. This is all a smoke screen around what should be a pretty simple decision to around the 1972 Communities Act. So we got the red herring of Article 50, but what we're doing is making it ever more complicated so the talks can go on ever longer. And as we're about to see, we're just being locked deeper and deeper into the mire of the European Union. And Alex is saying that European Union becoming ever more dangerous as Germany and the banks get more control.
Yes. And speaking of judges, and Alex, I think we probably just need to up the pace a little bit here, but this is the Irish Times reporting on Irish judges, and they're suggesting that judges might need to have a register of interest because really they may just forget about their oaths of office.
I think that Shane Ross, the Minister for Transport in Dublin, was actually probably being quite sincere here, but I can see why it would be understood cynically. The thing is that Ireland has this fantastic small number of independents, both in the Dáil, the lower house, and in the Senate. And because of that, for example, we have an independent senator who has corresponded on our behalf or on the Doherty's behalf with Irish agencies, although he's been told to get lost. He's at least he's done it and warmly done it as well. And here we have an independent member of the Dáil who is a member of the cabinet because the independents form a bloc as well. And this Shane Ross has said it's not enough for judges to be on their oath, which is something that people have woken up to, that in common law countries that judges can be acting on their oath or not, and if not, they're unlawful and can be prosecuted. He said, well, it's not enough because they could genuinely disregard. He's being polite by saying forget. He means disregard their oath. We need a register of judges' interests. There is just about one of these in England and Wales now, and I think in Northern Ireland. Scotland famously has said, no, absolutely not. Judges are your masters and you mustn't murmur against them, as it's actually a crime in Scots law to murmur judges. So you can see that independent MPs, where they're allowed to exist, or whether people have got the gumption to vote for them, can do a lot to hold arbitrary power and judicial tyranny in check.
Yes. Well, let's look at France now because Sarkozy was taking part in the primary for his party for the presidential election and unfortunately lost. But this article here suggesting, what is this guy, a Thatcherite you described him as?
Yes, Fillon calls himself a Thatcherite, and as the Le Huffington Post is saying here, they're a bit more reliable than the English and American versions. The Huffington Post is correctly saying he is for Thatcherite deregulation. Now, people could be for or against that, but it means he's a rare bird in French politics and probably quite a man of principle compared with the others, at least. And Sarkozy has realized that he's far too centrist to stand a chance against Marine Le Pen. So in desperation, the French Republican Party, which is the umpteenth name for the de Gaulle supporters from the 50s, they've decided that they're going to have to put Fillon up against Le Pen to stand any chance of stopping her. But of course, Fillon is so hated by the unions that they're just going to lose 30% off the left end of the spectrum, who are going to vote for the radical socialist instead. So it only adds up to Le Pen probably being assured of victory. Lots of people are tweeting that the stupid British press is predicting impossible things. I saw the ex-editor of the technical section of Die Zeit saying in a tweet this week, if you read the British press, you would be under the impression that the EU was about to fall apart and that Marine Le Pen stood a chance of being elected president of France. Well, I think that's a tweet to hold in reserve and wave under his nose next year, possibly.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, you asked us to include this one, but actually I'm going to ask Dave to comment on this, if you don't mind. This is the Express. EU army to be agreed today, and Britain will foot the £420 million a year bill. The EU will today ratify the creation of a continent-wide super army that will be up and running next year and blame Brexit for its creation. David, I don't even know what to say about that.
Thank you. Well, it's very ironic considering the amount of releases that we've put into the Express that they're then taking this tack. So this is the watershed moment, isn't it? When you overlap with the crisis that they've got, and it's very interesting because I was speaking to Lord Tebbit yesterday, and he said, "Well, just rather awkward, isn't it? Because on the one hand, yes, this is a fundamental thing; it's vital to them; it's absolutely vital." He said, "Oh well, they're broke. How are they going to do it?" I said, "Well, it's easy because they've got their own printing presses. They'll just print the money. It's pretty straightforward." So this is to all of those that were saying that this was a pipe dream and a nonsense, and there was a few in the military saying, "Oh, don't be so ridiculous. It won't work. It can't happen." Despite all that, look at the reality now. Just assess the battlefield as it is in front of you, in plain view. This is there now. It's up. It's running. And I think that a lot of us that have been warning of it are now feeling vindicated. However, the work must start now. Properly, gloves off, to get it stopped and get Britain unwound from this and unravelled from it as fast as humanly possible. Otherwise, all of the other nonsense that we've seen about the Brexit, and we're doing that. Well, we won't unless this is stopped, and it's as simple as that.
David, we've got a bit more on this, which we'll come on to. We've got Lithuania is going to come onto the screen in a minute, so we've got more time to talk about this. But I'm just going to say that I am appalled by the pitiful standard of many of our retired senior officers. They seem unable to grasp the simplest events in politics. Now, whether this is because they are simply out of the loop, they don't know who to talk to. But there's that aspect. There's also the fact that they seem terrified to actually stand up and put an opinion out. I think some of them think that if more than 3 of them gather, it's going to be some sort of coup to replace Theresa May. Where does this fear and trembling come from in these supposedly brave warriors that we've got?
The fear, of course, is that they've done their job. As an officer, you just get issued orders and you get on with it. And of course, the command chain through government, is well established. And the biggest problem is, and I'll come back to something you said, and it fits true to all the rest of them. You're out there doing your job, whatever that is, whether Navy, Air Force, Royal Marines, Army. And you just expect everyone else to do their job. And of course, the politicians are not. They're doing something completely different. And this is the problem. And there's a trust issue here. And I've got to say, yesterday, as the senior admiral stated, that he felt ashamed of the governments over the last 20 years. And I would say that's probably, that's nowhere near strong enough, but it's certainly a start. And on what I've got to say is, a lot of them during this week, because the EU has turned over in effect, its last and most important trump card. This is their ace of hearts that they've just turned over and revealed. And now is the time for them all to realize just exactly how important this is. This military union is as important as the euro itself. Without the military union, there can be none of the other factors. There can be no political union. There will be no currency, the euro. It is the most important key factor that they desire. It's the most valuable thing that we've got, our military. It's the most important thing that they desire. So this is the tactical game that we've now got to play. A lot of them have got to up their game substantially and fast. They've got to get out there and they've got to challenge it. And as I've said all along, when we went through the Brexit campaign, there was no way that this was going to be debated under Vote Leave and the Conservatives or the Labour. They were locked out because they were getting their instructions from on high. So those senior officers, the model that we had during Brexit of them speaking out under their own rank and their own office, can now do so. They can really do so now because the movement that has happened can now go faster and further because the EU has revealed its hand. And now is the time to jump upon it. And I'm reassured by this, by something that Admiral Boyce said yesterday in the House. He said that the Strategic and Security Defence Review, and I've always called it the EU one because that's what it was. It cut to join us, is now not fit for purpose. So this is the moment. We've seen someone like Boyce actually leap on this. And he needs to really start going for it. And all of those guys that are in the Wide Awake Club, in the Lords and in Parliament, have now got to get on it, and they've got to get on it fast. Otherwise, we're done for. It's as simple as that. If this isn't stopped, nothing. The Brexit thing is, forget it. It won't mean anything. So, that's the key thing. These people have got to pick up the gauntlet now and start fighting, and they've got to fight hard.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, of course, in order to keep pressure on. For all this, we've got to be putting pressure on Russia. So we are off to Lithuania this week. It started a couple of days ago. NATO's largest scale exercise in Lithuania is how they're describing it. This is Iron Sword 2016, a multinational exercise from the 20th of November to the 3rd of December, training 4,000 soldiers from 11 NATO allies: Canada, Estonia, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Poland, Romania, Slovenia, UK and the US. Battalion tactical groups of national and international composition will hone defensive and offensive tactics at the same time, training interoperability and concerted actions amongst NATO allies. So it's taking place in two main locations. The first consisting of 2 battalion tactical groups and an assigned artillery battalion. The second training and evaluation of Dragoon Battalion and a battalion for the first time formed by reserve soldiers. So they're looking at continuous mandatory initial military service in Lithuania. So they're all getting involved in this. What can we say? In the meantime, in the Ukraine, that's being ramped up again, and Crimea in particular. So this is officers of Ukraine's security service. Well, the Russians are saying that they abducted 2 Russian servicemen in Crimea, and a warrant officer and a junior sergeant. They've been taken to military facilities where they're expected to be tortured, in fact, is what the Russians are saying, certainly severe psychological pressure. Well, as you can see, Sergei Lavrov not too impressed. He said, "We believe that this was an illegitimate provocation by Ukraine's intelligence services against Russian citizens on Russia's territory." So the things ramping up against Russia at the moment.
Yeah, Alex, perhaps we could have your opinion on that one.
Yes, I'm glad you put the Lavrov quote up there because he's got absolutely brilliant English, but he is still thinking of the Russian word provokatsiya, obviously just the Russian form of the word provocation, which has a specific meaning with a long history since the Soviet Union broke up. Provokatsiya means where Western-backed forces set up a staged incident and either put on false uniforms or get local militias to do something hot-headed in order to draw the Russians out and change the legal nature of what's going on. For example, obligations under conventions will be suspended if people are not wearing the right uniform. So provocation is not just a way of him saying the Ukrainians are shaking their fists at us or saying Yabu to us. It has a technical meaning, which is that he thinks that the Ukrainians, possibly in collusion with the Americans and British, have staged an incident in order to thwart the rules of war.
That's a pretty strong statement then.
Yes, and Lavrov never puts a word out of place. He's been on this scene for many, many years. He knows Ukraine intimately, and he knows how his words will be analysed as well. So he is actually saying, as he said for years, but more particularly recently, we've caught on to your game. We know what you're doing.
Wow, okay.
So we've got some interesting stuff happening here, provocation, but I'm also going to introduce the term defence engagement. This is what UK is talking about at the moment as part of its defence review. This appears to be soft power through the military, but also we've got these huge budgets for special forces, 1.9 billion going into special forces. We've got huge amounts of money going into using the web for military operations, and of course we're suppressing free press, and we're introducing propaganda, which we're going to have a look at in a minute. But let's have a look at some of the material that's being put in front of the general public, and this, I think, takes the biscuit. We've got to watch the incredible moment the 20-ton F-35 fighter jet lands vertically. It's landed vertically, Mike, on a US aircraft carrier. It didn't land conventionally. This aircraft is so incredible, it landed vertically. So I think at this point we ought to bring in this picture, which is of the Harrier prototype, which had just landed vertically on an aircraft carrier, British aircraft carrier, in 1962. Yes. But we are apparently to be overwhelmed that the F-35 has now managed to land vertically on an American aircraft carrier. And of course, we had a supersonic version of the Harrier ready to go, scrapped by British government. So we've now got this £70 million aircraft, each aircraft 70 million minimum, and it's being labelled as the most expensive piece of military hardware ever seen in the world. So unit cost, you lose these things, you're going to be wiped out economically.
But in fairness, it's going to be so unreliable that the fact that we have the maintenance contract must provide some use.
Well, this is true. We've got airframe problems. We've got the engines bursting into fire. We've got avionics problems. But Britain has got the contract to help repair these aircraft, so we can be proud of that. Yeah. I'll just show you this one as well, because we got more of it. This was part of the Telegraph business that was crowing that it had everything we needed to know about this new £70 million stealth fighter. Of course, we haven't got aircraft carriers at the moment properly operational to take this aircraft, and even if we did, it's going to take years to get the full systems working. But encourage you to go and have a look at this business article, because in it there's some fairly simplistic breakdown of what the Defence Review 2015 was all about. And before I just bring David in, if you have a look at the House of Lords reports here, we can see very interesting things going on. Strategic Defence and Security Review. We're back into 2016 now. We've got this one, Lord West of Spithead. He's saying, "My lords, I'm afraid that the comfortable words about our defence forces just will not wash. I'm delighted that in this chamber and the other place there is a growing groundswell of people who understand that we have not got sufficiently strong defence forces." This is extraordinary language, David. We no longer have armed forces. We are presumably a third or fourth rate state, and we've got some form of defence forces.
Yeah, I spoke to Admiral West this morning, and this is certainly an interesting phrase that he's used, because it's the same as what Sajiv David made a couple of years ago. And I said, well, no, as far as I was aware, we had Crown armed services in this country. Defence forces is what Germany have, and obviously what Japan has. So I'm very, very alarmed at the phraseology here from a head of service, an admiral. So that's not good, and I think we've got to go. Hang on, where are we going with that, Admiral West? But the interesting thing, of course, is where the Hawker Siddeley Harrier is concerned, that the 72 that we sold to the Americans for about 50 pence, and bearing in mind that they were just refitted with all new current avionics and a British weapons system that was all BAE. So, work and jobs and stability, and adding to our engineering tree in the nation. All that was just lost. We've not only lost our own British defence system, which was a perfectly good, proven, tried and trusted weapons system, the Harrier, and then the through-deck cruisers that they operated from. We've got rid of all of that. So we're talking about we're being broke. Hang on, there's nothing wrong with any of that. It was all paid for. It all worked. This is, there wasn't an impact on a capital budget for this. This was just an operational budget issue. So we've got rid of all of that. Now we've spent a huge amount of money with Lockheed. Follow the money, find the policy. So this is an utter nonsense what we're seeing here. And Admiral Woodward in 2010 and the rest of that group there with Julian Thompson ripped that F-35 to shreds in committee. And one of the key things was that, basically it was going to do us no good whatsoever, because of the way it would be operated, the software control that Lockheed would have, and the thing was just fundamentally, just the square peg in a round hole. Look, what's the point of having a stealth aircraft on an aircraft carrier of that size? If that turns up off the coast of your country, believe you me, they will know it's there. So the whole point of having a stealth aircraft is a nonsense. Any country will know that you're about to be attacked from the air. It's an utter nonsense. It's a joke. We've been hoodwinked, and I'm really, really pleased after 2 years of sort of correspondence with Mike Hookham there in UKIP that the gloves have come off with Mike Hookham, and he's going for this, and he's citing Admiral Woodward. Fully support Mike Hookham on this. He's now doing some good work. And what I want to see is the body of the UKIP church be really productive with this. And I want to see Mr. Nuttall pick this gauntlet up and properly throw it down, because if he does, he will find that the great body of the church of this country will get behind him and say, yes, we want to keep Her Majesty's Armed Services. We do not want European defence forces. This is the key thing. Mr. Nuttall here has got an opportunity here to politically outflank both Labour and Conservative with this, and he needs to really, really think about what the people of this country will support. And I tell you for a fact, they will not support going down this avenue that we're going down at the moment with Theresa May.
David, thank you for that, and also pointing out that we're starting to see some proper engagement. Let's just have a little look behind the scenes very, very quickly at the sort of debate that goes on. So this is all part of this Lords debate. Lots of Lords talking to each other in terribly polite language because that makes them sound more intelligent and more intellectual. But here we've got Earl Howe, the Ministry of State, Deputy Leader of the House of Lords. He's replying and he's saying, well, we recognise that we live in a more dangerous and troublesome world, but I come back to the Joint Force 2025 concept. It's a long-term programme. It's designed to enable our armed forces to respond to a wider range of more sophisticated potential adversaries and complex real-world challenges. This is complete drivel because all we're talking about is a concept of how armed forces can be used. And if you haven't got the forces, you can't send them in. So here we've now got people saying, well, have we got a border force? Are there really enough ships, vessels and aircraft patrolling our borders? Lord Harris of Haringey coming in and Baroness Williams of Trafford. I think I made it clear in my follow-up response to the law that the border force has invested in its maritime capability. So we haven't got a navy, but not to worry, we've got a border force on that one. And if we have a look at here's Lord West, and he's saying, surely a good way forward would be to order more ships. No, well, that's an intellectual solution. We haven't got enough. We should order some more. And it would be a good idea to order them if we were using British steel to actually build those vessels ourselves and help support the shipbuilding industry. And back comes Earl Howe here. And he says, well, don't worry, because Sir John Parker has got a national shipbuilding strategy for UK shipyards. Well, I don't see an expansion in shipbuilding, Mike. We see a retraction, and on it goes here. And of course, eventually, we've got Lord Boyce saying, well, those nasty Russians are going to murder us all. So we do need some ships, but we haven't actually ordered them. And if you really want to understand that, have a look at this House of Commons booklet on the Strategic Defence Review 2015. We've got tiers, we've got analysis, and analysis on analysis, analysis of analysis, but no forces. It's all talk. And this is the bit I thought you might be interested in, because we're now going to help defend ourselves by projecting our global influence without a military, but we're going to use effectively military soft power to run other people's armed services.
Is that not an oxymoron?
It would be, Mike, but actually, if you look at what they're doing, we have not got the capability to defend our own nation, but we're giving our military expertise to burrow its way into other nation states' military, and that gives us control. This is what's happening in the eastern states. And of course, this is very, very dangerous because we've got UK out of control, putting advisors in to take control of other people's armed forces. They're going to be the cannon fodder. Alex, I don't know whether you'd like to respond to that aspect.
Just on some personal note as regards the Earl Howe, he is the son of the Royal Navy officer Commander Chambray George William Penn Curzon, a commander in the Royal Navy in the Great War, and he then went off to be a matinee idol in a string of Alfred Hitchcock films. So that might tell you a thing or two.
Thank you. Well, let's just bring in Sandy Woodward. David Ellis mentioned him just now. This is the article he was talking about. I've actually got a date 2011 on this one, but 2010, 2011, and this is what he said. The truth is, we couldn't defend anything further than the other side of the channel. And that's going back 5 years ago. We've had massive cuts since then. Despite good men like Admiral Woodward saying there's something very, very wrong here, we're still not seeing any proper response from the government, of course, so they can lock us into the EU. But here they are crowing of the exceptionally close defence and security relationship with the French, which was achieved behind closed doors by the 2010 Lancaster House Treaty. So this is more evidence, David, surely, that the intent to lock us into the EU military was done with those dirty deals through the residence of the British ambassador Paris, amongst other things, to make sure that Britain could not stand alone, but had to beg and borrow from the EU military force.
Absolutely. Admiral Woodward can be completely and utterly vindicated here. He was my inspiration to get involved and start challenging this in 2010. And I've got to say that everything he said is now proving correct. And the fundamentals here are do we want to do this as a nation? Because obviously the opposition's argument that they're being fed this policy from on high that they're implementing and have implemented through for the Blair regime, through the Cameron regime, and now through the May regime, because nothing's changing, is that they would do it on a European basis. It would be managed on a European basis. So they would manage the money and the budgets from a single point control from Brussels. So, it's very straightforward. If you're not going to have your own military, you're not actually a nation anymore. So they've overlooked that one. And of course, this now explains why they wouldn't discuss it, why it was never in a manifesto, why it was taken off the questionnaires on people's doorsteps by policy control heads of policy control, because they didn't want the people to even consider it, or it to be a factor or an issue, because it was all going to be done on a completely covert basis. Whilst the exchange rate mechanism and the currency union had to be all done out in the public, the one thing that they thought of, and they've made a serious mistake with this, believe you me, this is now blown up. It blown up when we intercepted that letter from Number 10 with Cameron appending admirals and generals' names on it, and we went straight to Steve Baker MP, who got this out and got it activated. But of course, then we hit the wall because Vote Leave. Oh no, we don't want to do that. It's far. Oh crikey, no, it's not an issue. It's not an issue, is it? So the defence budgets of every country in Europe are not an issue. How much money is that? So somebody there, explain that one, because frankly, I think they're wrong. But what we're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, this is ringside seats for the effective murder of Crown armed services, Royal Navy, Royal Air Force, Royal Marines, British Army, lock, stock and barrel, or both smoking barrels in effect. So, this is, I can't use the strong enough words for this. Now is the time for positive action to remedy this. It is absolutely vital that, this is challenged as hard and as fast by everyone humanly possible. Because if we don't retain control of our military, if they're foolish enough to think that this can be managed on a European basis where they will call the shots literally from Brussels, it's not going to work. It is not going to work. They're going to end up trying to pretext a war with Russia. These people are insane. This is not going to work.
Okay, David, thank you very much for that. Well, we just break from the military subject at the moment with some important announcements. And the first one we've got is that John and Tina Hurst, John Hurst, is facing a council tax court hearing tomorrow. That's in Llandrindod Wells Magistrates Court at 1:30. He is facing an attempted imprisonment. So despite his argued evidence into the court, this has all been ignored for months, and now suddenly he's faced with this hearing where there may well be an attempt to imprison him. So we would like to call for anybody who can attend to go and give John and Tina support. There's John's email address, lawfulrebel@gmail.com, and his telephone number to get in contact. And as we said at the British Constitution Group conference at the weekend, supporting each other is one of the most important things that we can do to stand up to this tyranny we're seeing unfolding. Recognition of the very good work done by activist Patrick Cullinan. Here's the Harrow Times reporting that tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, there's going to be a mass held for him in in St Joseph's Catholic Church, High Street, Harrow Weald. So we hope if your local area, you will be able to attend and obviously give his family some support.
That's at 7 p.m.
That's at 7 p.m. in the evening. The funeral, his funeral is at the morning, I think it's 11 o'clock, but that's a private family funeral, and the mass is at 7 p.m. And the other man who needs some support is Robert Green. Robert has received a communication which shows that He's still being pursued by the Scottish state. This time they're chasing supposed court expenses, a court case run by the Scottish government while trying to make out that a private individual was responsible, but they are now threatening to send bailiffs to his Chester home. So if anybody can be available to help support Robert, please let us know and we'll give further contact details.
Right.
Serious times.
Yes. So we're just going to move forward through because we're out of time here. But we wanted to put this note, as best you could describe it, from Tim Farron, who had been challenged by one of our viewers over the unaccompanied child refugees and the fact that they were coming into care in this country and then disappearing out of care and into sexual slavery and child trafficking in this country. And we thought this was probably the most, how would you even describe this response? Mr. Farron has responded saying, "Thank you very much for your recent email with regard to refugee children who've gone missing and the misfortune of a family." Well, so addressing the children's issue, the fact that children are disappearing from care in this country, this is what Mr. Farron had to say, the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party, saying, "I would slightly disagree with your first contention that the issues you have raised are more important than my local constituents. For example, I think the 2,500 local families affected by flooding would disagree that their plight is unimportant." Nobody, of course, for 1 second is suggesting that people affected by flooding should not be considered in the greater scheme of things. But this response is
sickening is the word.
Yes.
It is absolutely sickening. Over 300 children, which we invite into Britain to be protected, go missing. Mr. Fallon has said in writing, we have the email, where he said, yes, I accept that many of these children are going to be trafficked, sexually abused, well, possibly murdered, I'll add that bit. And then he says, well, actually, at the moment, I've got to be careful because if I don't look after the flooding, what he's worried about is he'll lose his seat. So if we want to be positive about this disgraceful statement, Mr. Farron is actually telling people, if you want to make your MPs nervous, go for the support base in their constituencies. But Mr. Farron does not give a fig that children are disappearing. Hundreds of children are disappearing. He doesn't care that they're being sexually abused because he's got better things to do. It's outrageous. Alex, I better stop there because I may use some adjectives that I would regret later.
Well, if you would like to deploy a word which can just about go out on air, I see in the chat room that one of our viewers thinks that Mr. Farron has revealed himself to be an anagram of Newark. But that aside, I received from that very kind viewer of ours a drop copy of that, as you did, and Brian and Mike. And I took the opportunity then to reply to Mr. Farron a couple of days ago in a fresh email saying, "Dear Mr. Farron, at the end of your email, you said you would be happy to look into the Doherty case, which you said you didn't know much about. Here are the links to the Doherty files and particularly to the transcript." I then got an auto reply, basically saying, "If you're not my constituent, you can do one." So we'll see whether anything comes of that. But I did point out that he is a churchgoer like me, and he ought to be particularly interested in what Roman Catholic clergy have been doing to shove the Dohertys from pillar to post and to hound them, really, in hand in glove with the establishment.
Thank you for that, Alex. I'll just add to that, of course, this excuse which is continually used by British MPs, oh, you're not a constituent, or the crime took place, but it didn't involve one of my constituents, therefore I don't have any responsibility. I can't get involved in a matter connected to the constituency of another MP. This is simply a gentleman's agreement that's been written through Westminster. It has no standing at law whatsoever. But we have MPs now who are simply saying, I don't care if there's criminal activity, murder of children, child abuse happening elsewhere in the country. I'm only responsible for my constituency. This is an absolute disgrace. And this man, Farron, should be removed as leader of the Lib Dems as fast as possible. It's an utter disgrace.
David.
That's exactly what Colonel Bob Stewart said to me. It's exactly the scenario that we had there with Colonel Bob Stewart. with attempting to get him to do something positive in, from everything that he's always said about complaining about the cuts, to actually go forward and do something positive. That was the last conversation I had with Bob.
But
me personally, not
it
his
wasn't
MP.
just
Me personally, not his MP. I said, well, no, we're doing this as a company and in an advisory capacity. And you're on DEFCON, so I'm sorry that argument just doesn't wash at all. But that is what he said to us.
Yeah. Well, there we have it, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're obviously seeing that things unfolding in UK and Europe getting ever more serious. All we can do is continue to push out as much information as we've got. But of course, the other thing is that when you have the information, you've got the picture as to what's happened. It's vital that you are out there telling other people. It's no good waiting for somebody else to take the lead. We've all got to do it as individuals and in very big numbers if we're going to stop what is a slide towards a dictatorship at home, and of course a dictatorship in Europe that it seems will be achieved on the back of war. And the only people to profit from that will be, of course, the bankers. So difficult and dangerous times. The information's there. Speak out and act, because it's the action that conquers fear. Thanks very much. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.